The sun rose gently over the village, casting its warm golden rays on the rooftops and pathways. It was a perfect day. One that would be remembered for years to come. The day was filled with joy, laughter, and celebration in Bidemi's family compound, with the sound of drums, chatter, and hurried footsteps filled the air. The excitement was infectious, and everyone had a task. Women bustled about, arranging chairs and ensuring the food was just right, while children picked curiously at the decorations, and their laughter blending with the cheerful songs playing in the background. Inside the biggest room in the house, Bidemi sat in front of a mirror, her face glowing with happiness, and her traditional wedding attire was a beautiful yellow lace, sparkling as it hugged her figure perfectly. Her heart racing with excitement and nervousness, as Titi, her best friend, adjusted the beads. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," Titi said, her voice thick with emotions. Bidemi smiled, her dimples showing. "I can't believe this is finally happening," she whispered. Just then, her mother entered the room, wiping tears from her eyes. "Oh, Bidemi, you are the pride of this family," she said. "Today, the world will see what a treasure you are and how lucky Ao is to have you as his wife." Outside, Ao waited patiently, dressed in a rich abode made of beautiful brown fabric that fit perfectly with his skin tone. He was surrounded by his groomsmen, who joked and laughed, trying to ease his obvious excitement. Ao was everything a man should be: wealthy, kind, and deeply in love with one woman. He is every woman's dream. But today, his eyes were only for Bidemi. When she finally stepped out of the house, the crowd cheered loudly. Her beauty was breathtaking, and as she walked towards Ao, her steps were graceful, her smile radiant. Ao couldn't take his eyes off her. When she finally stood beside him, his voice was low enough for only her to hear. "You're my everything," he whispered. The wedding was one of the most celebrated and talked about events in the village. The whole community gathered to witness the union of Bidemi and her wealthy groom Ao. The venue was designed with colorful fabrics and fragrant flowers that danced in the wind. Bidemi, wearing her sparkling traditional wedding attire, walked down the aisle with a smile. Her beauty was unmatched, and everyone whispered about the couple. Women gossiped about how lucky Bidemi is to marry Ao, and even the men admired Ao for finding such a treasure. Her mother, Mama Tinu, was busy welcoming guests, her face glowing with pride. Mama Tinu had waited years for this moment, often boasting about her daughter's beauty, intelligence, and good fortune. "I told everyone," she said to some of her village women. "Bidemi will marry well. God has truly blessed me." Her friends nodded in agreement, some out of genuine happiness, others masking their envy. The celebration lasted all day, filled with laughter, music, and feasting. And the reception was even more vibrant. And the tables were loaded with food: jollof rice, pounded yam, egusi soup, grilled fish, and more. Drinks flowed freely, and the music from the live band made it impossible for anyone to sit down. Bidemi and Ao danced with their guests, and their faces glowing with happiness. Everywhere they turned, people offered congratulations, blessings, and prayers for a happy marriage. Mama Tinu, Bidemi's mother, was the happiest and proudest person in the event. She wore an expensive royal blue outfit, moving from table to table and boasting about her daughter. "My Bidemi is not just beautiful, she is hardworking, kind, and brings blessings to anyone who marries her. She will bring Ao nothing but blessings," Mama Tinu said loudly, her voice full of pride. Everyone smiled and praised her for raising such a wonderful daughter. But unknown to Mama Tinu and Bidemi, among the crowd sat a woman with a heart full of envy. Mama Shola, a longtime friend of Mama Tinu. She smiled and laughed like the rest, but deep inside, jealousy burned in her heart. For years, she had envied Mama Tinu and her daughter's achievements. Every time they met, Mama Tinu would brag endlessly about Bidemi and find a way to belittle Mama Shola's daughters, calling them lazy, uncultured, and unfortunate. As Mama Tinu moved around, enjoying the praises, Mama Shola sat in a corner, watching her with an evil smile. "We shall see," she muttered under her breath. When the wedding was over, Bidemi and Eo returned home with countless gifts. Their house was filled with boxes of expensive items, which they stored away for later. After a few weeks of resting and getting back to their normal life as a couple, Bidemi decided to open the gifts one afternoon. "Let's open our gifts," she said, her voice soft but excited. Eo, who was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper, looked up and laughed. "Just a few. With all these gifts, it will take us a whole week to finish." They both laughed as they opened the first box. It was a microwave. The next package revealed a set of golden plates. There was also a washing machine, a television, and even an air fryer. Each gift seemed more extravagant than the last, and with every box they opened, their excitement grew. Overwhelmed with joy, Bidemi decided to unwrap more gifts one by one to pass time. The gifts included expensive items, kitchen appliances, fancy decorations, and much more. "Eo, look at this air conditioner," she shouted, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Eo smiled warmly and walked over to her. "People really went all out for us," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. After hours of opening gifts, Bidemi picked up a box wrapped in plain brown paper. It felt heavy. "What could this be?" she murmured, unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a beautiful mortar, carved from dark wood with detailed patterns marked into its surface. It looked unique and old-fashioned, standing out from all the modern, expensive gifts. Bidemi burst into laughter. "Who gives a mortar as a gift in this present day and age?" she joked, holding it up for Eo to see. He laughed as well. "Maybe it's from an old-fashioned relative," he said with a smile. Even though Bidemi found it strange, she couldn't help but admire the mortar's beautiful design. After a while, she became tired and decided to move the rest of the gifts to the storage room. She took the mortar and placed it in the storage room as well. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "but I don't think we'll ever use it." With that, the mortar was forgotten, left in the corner of their new home, gathering dust. The first year of Bidemi and Eo's marriage was pure bliss. Eo's business flourished, bringing him more wealth and connections. Bidemi quickly settled into her role as a wife, preparing delicious meals for her husband and managing their home with care. 6 months into the marriage, Bidemi became pregnant, and their joy was beyond measure. "You are my lucky charm," Eo would often say, kissing her forehead as they celebrated the good news. Their marriage became the envy of the villagers. Everyone admired their love, unity, and the way they supported each other in everything. Some villagers often commented on how lucky Eo was to have married Bidemi. "She has brought you nothing but blessings," they would say, and Eo, filled with pride, would nod in agreement. But behind the smiling faces and warm congratulations, jealousy grew in the hearts of some villagers. Mama Shola, in particular, grew angrier with each passing day as she watched Mama Tinu bask in Bidemi's success. "She thinks she's better than everyone else," Mama Shola muttered bitterly. One evening, as she sat in her house, her anger boiling over, Mama Shola grabbed her daughter's hand and said, "Let her enjoy it while it lasts." Unaware of the growing storm, Bidemi continued to live in peace. She and Eo often talked excitedly about the future, imagining their child running around their home. "Our baby will be as beautiful as you," Eo said one night, gently placing a hand on her growing belly. Bidemi smiled warmly, her heart full of contentment and happiness. Little did she know that her perfect life was about to take a dark and irreversible turn. Their love grew stronger with each passing day. Eo made it a habit to come home early, often surprising Bidemi with thoughtful gifts, her favorite snacks, a bouquet of fresh flowers, or a handwritten note filled with sweet words. In return, Bidemi prepared his favorite meals, and creating a home filled with warmth and love. Even the village elders couldn't help but notice Eo's newfound glow, often commenting on how Bidemi has brought Eo good fortune, and it seemed true. Eo's business continued to flourish, and the couple soon began making plans to start a family. Meanwhile, Mama Tinu reveled in her daughter's success. She dressed in her finest attire, a royal blue lace gown decorated with intricate gold designs that shimmered under the sunlight. Her matching girlie was tied high and perfectly styled, commanding attention wherever she went. Around her neck, she wore a heavy beaded necklace, and her wrists jingled with golden bangles that clinked together as she gestured proudly. Mama Tinu made sure everyone noticed her, as she basked in the glory of her daughter's happiness. Mama Tinu's gold shoes, adorned with tiny sparkling rhinestones, tapped confidently on the ground as she walked proudly through the village. Her luxurious handbag swinging in her hands, as if it held all the secrets to her success. Her voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the air and demanding attention. "Oh, my Bidemi! My golden daughter," she exclaimed with pride. "How many of you can say your daughters married a man as successful as my son-in-law?" Eo is not just wealthy, he worships her. Have you seen their house? Even governors envy them. She added some lies to make her point even stronger and peppering her friends with envy. She glanced at the women around her, smirking as they tried to hide their irritation. Any attempt to interrupt her was waved off with a dismissive hand. "It's not by sending your daughters to school, oh. Look at Mama Shola's child, still roaming about jobless. And Mama Chioma's daughter. Huh. She's 30, still single and searching for a husband." Mama Tinu threw her head back and laughed heartily, her comments carefully crafted to sting just enough. She enjoyed the discomfort of her friends, basking in their attention and her imagined authority. As Mama Tinu strolled through the market square, women stopped her eagerly to offer their congratulations. "Mama Bidemi, you are truly blessed," one woman said, clasping her hands together. "Oh, my sister, what can I say? God has buttered my bread," Mama Tinu replied, feigning humility while her face glowed with pride. She straightened her back and stood taller as more women gathered around her, admiring her elegant attire and asking about Bidemi's new life. But not everyone shared in her joy. Some women, sitting quietly at their market stalls, exchanged knowing glances and muttered under their breaths. "Look at her, showing off as if her daughter is the only one to marry well," one said with a sneer. Another added, "Let's hope this pride doesn't lead to a fall." Mama Tinu, however, paid no attention to the whispers. As she confidently said, her voice ringing out like the beat of a drum. "When your daughter brings you joy, you don't hide it. My Bidemi is everything a mother could ask for, intelligent, beautiful, and married to a man who knows her worth. What about yours?" She smirked as she spoke, her words sharp and deliberate, cutting through the air like a blade. The jealousy in some women's eyes was unmistakable, while others secretly admired her confidence and wished they could share in such blessings. Mama Tinu enjoyed every moment, basking in her self-imposed glory, never suspecting the envy and resentment her words were planting in the hearts of those around her. The sun set on a warm evening, and the comforting aroma of freshly cooked meat broth filled the house. Bidemi stood in the kitchen, humming happily as she prepared ingredients for dinner. Despite being pregnant, she insisted on cooking for Eo, seeing it as her way of showing love and care. Eo had tried to convince her to rest. "Let the maids handle it," he told her countless times. But Bidemi always refused. "I want to cook for you. It makes me happy," she'd reply with a warm smile, playfully patting his cheek. "And, besides, I don't want anyone else stealing my place in your heart with their food." Eo laughed, shaking his head. "No one can take your place, Bidemi. You are my everything." Bidemi was preparing a special dinner, Eo's favorite meal, egusi soup and pounded yam, when disaster struck. She reached for the blender on the upper shelf to blend some peppers, but in her haste, it slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor. Pieces of glass and plastic scattered everywhere. "Oh no," she said, her heart sinking as she stared at the mess. She couldn't let this ruin the meal. It has to be ready before Ao gets back. Her eyes scanned the kitchen in desperation, and then they landed on the mortar sitting in the corner, gathering dust. She smiled to herself and thought, why not? It's old-fashioned, but it works, and I'll still need it to pound the yam anyway. With newfound determination, she dusted off the mortar and began grinding the peppers the traditional way, her hands pounding as she embraced the simplicity of it. The rhythmic motion of her hands seemed to calm her as she walked, the wooden pestle striking the mortar with a satisfying thud. Unbeknownst to her, at the same time far away in a secret, dark room filled with charms and red candles, another woman was also pounding a larger mortar. This one was filled with blood, and as she pounded it, she murmured incantations under her breath. She had been waiting for this moment. Bidemi continued to pound, and soon the air was filled with the fresh scent of ground pepper. But as she finished, she suddenly felt an odd sensation in her chest, a tightness that made her stop. Her breath became shallow, and a wave of dizziness washed over her. She shook her head, trying to brush it off. "It's just the pregnancy," she told herself. "I'm just tired," she thought, hoping to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping inside her. When Ao arrived home that evening, something felt off. He entered the house with a frown, his brow furrowed in stress. "What's wrong, my love?" Bidemi asked, stepping toward him with a warm smile. But instead of the usual greeting, Ao merely asked, "Where's my food?" "It's on the dining table," Bidemi replied, surprised by his cold tone. Without another word, Ao brushed past her and made his way to the dining table. Bidemi stood there, watching him in confusion. Maybe he had a bad day at work, she thought, trying to stay positive. "Ao," she called softly, but he didn't respond. He simply sat down at the table, his face still clouded with anger, leaving Bidemi to wonder what had caused such a change in him. Feeling uneasy, Bidemi followed him into the dining room. "Is something wrong, dear?" she asked again, her voice laced with concern. Ao didn't answer. Instead, he waved her away dismissively. Bidemi retreated to the sitting room, her worry growing as she watched him eat, his face tight with anger. Suddenly, Ao slammed his hand on the table. "Bidemi," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Startled, Bidemi rushed to his side, alarmed. "What is it, my dear?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. Ao glared at her, his eyes burning with rage, but he didn't look up. "What is this?" he demanded, pointing at the food. His voice was sharp, accusing. "This food tastes like trash. Is this what you call cooking?" Bidemi froze, her heart sinking. Her hands trembled as she tried to process his words. "What do you mean, Ao?" "It's your favorite dish," she stammered, confusion and hurt evident in her eyes. Without warning, Ao slapped her across the face, hard enough to send her stumbling back. "You think I'm stupid? What is this nonsense you cooked? You disgust me," he screamed, his voice full of venom. Bidemi stood there, stunned and broken, her hand pressed against her burning cheek. She couldn't understand what had just happened. Bidemi still frozen, holding her cheek, tears streaming down her face. "Ao, what have I done wrong?" she whispered, her voice barely hearable. But Ao didn't answer. He stormed out of the room, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. She tasted the food, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The meal was perfect, no too much salt or pepper, the soup was as delicious as always. But Ao had already stormed off, leaving her in a state of confusion. An unsettling chill crawled up her spine as she realized that something much deeper was troubling him. That night, as Bidemi lay in bed, she struggled to fall asleep. Her mind was in chaos, the memory of Ao's anger replaying over and over again. What happened? What did I do wrong? She asked herself, the thoughts circling in her head like a storm. She turned to her side, feeling the weight of confusion and frustration bearing down on her. As she finally drifted into sleep, the unthinkable happened. The discomfort in her stomach returned, but this time it was worse, sharp and unbearable. Bidemi woke up suddenly, grabbing her tummy as pain tore through her. "Ao," she screamed, her voice filled with agony, as the room spun around her. Ao, who had been fast asleep beside her, woke up with fear. "Bidemi," he shouted, rushing to her side. Before they could process what was happening, blood began flowing from between her legs. Panic filled the room as Ao quickly helped her into the car and sped to the nearest hospital. The night felt like a nightmare. At the hospital, the doctor's face was serious as he approached them. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "You've lost the baby." The miscarriage came suddenly and painfully, leaving Bidemi in shock, her heart drowning in sorrow and confusion.